The best part about DIYs is you get to make it yourself and you get to show off the talents in your own home. I'm going to show you how to make this floating shelf. It's really easy, it's really simple, and it's something that you can definitely be proud of. So what do we need? Well, I'm making this all out of one sheet of laminated pines, 2.4 long by 305 wide. Take my cutting list down to the guys at Builders and they'll cut it all to size for you. You've got all the pieces all cut to size. Now we just have the fun part of assembling it together. The rest of the materials that you need, I've got some 3.5 by 40 long screws, some wood glue, and some wood filler. As for the tools, a pencil, a measuring device, I'm using a combination square, a screw pilot, a drill driver, a jigsaw, a sander, a scraper, and to dress the timber is entirely up to you. I'm going to seal it with some polyurethane wood sealer. I really like this stuff. It keeps that clear, natural look of the timber. It doesn't go yellow. So before we get started, let's just have a look at what we've got to do. We've got our separate shelf pieces. We can pull these out. And then the main structure is this box section. Once we've built that box section, we're then going to cut out the slots to accommodate our shelves. So let's get started and mark out where we need to drill our holes. So we've got two pieces on the end, one either side, and then we've got our back piece. Now we can mark out with our pencil all the way across, all the way down, all the way across. So that's our first piece marked. We're now going to do exactly the same for our next piece. Now you'll notice I've put it flush on the edge, so let's move those guys out the way. And straight away now we want to position our drill hole in the middle of that section. If you go too close to the edge, it's going to burst out and damage the timber. Exactly the same on the next piece. We're going to drill all the way through there with our screw pilot, and that's going to countersink that screw slightly below the surface of the timber. Right, let's start the assembly. We've got our first piece, flip it up on its edge, and then take the end cap, which is the top piece or the bottom, and then we're going to line it up to the edge there. Now you can hold it in place by hand, or alternatively make use of some clamps. It makes your life so much easier. Right, and at this point you often find that it's got a little bit of misalignment. Just give it a gentle tap. Right, pop in the first screw, hold it into place, drive that screw in. Alternatively, you can always flip it over on the edge and drive those screws in. Okay, let's start with our back section. That's the back section of that little box. So we need wood glue on the edge there. And again, make use of a clamp. You can hold that nice and firm. Pop in your screws. That's your back piece in. Now your last end piece. Right, our last piece is the other side. So let's flip that down. Pop on some wood glue. Right, that's our box section complete. Now take the full length of the box and divide it by 4. That's going to give you 4 even spacings for our shelf. Now this is where combination square really does come into its own. First of all, I'm going to use it as a measure and a square edge. So I will take the square edge off. Remember, 4 sections out of 650 mils works out to be 162.5. That would give me the center position of each one of these shelves. This is about 20 mils thick. I've just double checked the measurement, and I'm going to move it over by 10 mils. So my first measuring point will be 152.5. And mark out 152.5. Now remember, each spacing is 162.5 according to this dimension. So instead of measuring it every single time, just mark it. Mark it on your measuring device, and I'm going to show you the benefit of that. So line it up to the one edge. My first point is 152.5. Then I'm going to slide it up, starting off from the next point with an offset of 162.5, which I know is the exact offset of each one of the shelves. Mark it there. There's my marking on the ruler. Slide it up again. And then the last section will be the same distance plus the thickness of the timber. So it works out to be perfectly, that's the center point there. Take it again, flip it over, and we want to make sure we have the same points on the other side. So that's our points marked. It's now time to put our combination square back together. I want to go in 100 mils deep. Again, you can change to any depth you want. Slide it along to my first line. I'm going to score a line all the way down the side and on the edge. Again to the next one, lining up with my marking point all the way down and across the top. All the way down and across the top. That's the top edge of my cut line and the back edge of my cavity there. So now you want to draw the next line to accommodate the thickness of the timber. Don't measure it, that way you're going to make a mistake. Just take your standard shelf that you're using, hold that into position, line it up on that line, and then score a line on the other side. Okay, that's our first section we're going to cut out. Take it and line it up to the next one, right up to the edge, making sure you've got that perfectly on the line, then score your line across. That's the other side. That way you know you've got exactly the thickness of the timber, and it's going to give a nice snug fit into that slot. That's it for the one side. Now exactly the same on the other side using the combination square and a shelf to mark it out. Our slots are all marked, they're exactly the same on each side. Now I'm going to use the jigsaw to cut those out. Clamp it down onto your table, and that way it's sturdy. You've got your hands free to focus on cutting that slot out accurately. Now you'll notice I'm using a down cutting blade. What that does, it prevents any chip out on the top surface. The chips, if there are any, will be on the inside, which is hidden away on the inside of your unit. Okay, so that's your first cut out. It's neat, it's accurate. Now remember, exactly the same for the next slots. Okay, so that's all my slots lined up. What we need to do now is fill these holes. Use some wood filler. Now use the color of wood filler to suit the material that you're working with. Allow that to dry and then give this a good sand down. Right, when it comes to sanding it down, I'm going to go with a 180 sandpaper grit. Now obviously we need to sand on the inside. Your sand is not going to fit in there, so you can either sand your panels beforehand if you want to, or the good old-fashioned way, pull off your piece of paper and do it by hand. And don't forget to sand your shelf pieces. Right, that's all the components complete. It's now time to seal the timber. You must seal the timber, otherwise it's going to get dirty over time. Now I've chosen to use the Rust-Oleum polyurethane sealer. It's clear, it's natural, it doesn't actually yellow the timber, which a lot of sealers actually do, especially with pine, and it's water-based, so it's super easy to wash up with. Follow the instructions on the can and apply 2 to 3 coats. Right, that's our sealer dry. All we need to do now is pop in our shelves. Now, it's entirely up to you what position you want. That one there, I've actually placed them in the middle. I kind of like the offset as well. So let's just line these ones up. There you go, a simple DIY, a great focal point in any home. All that we need to do now is actually go and hang it up in place and mount it to the wall. And then load it up with your ornaments or whatever you want to display on the shelf. Now remember, everything is available at your local builder's outlet. This really was an easy DIY that you can definitely do yourself. If you enjoyed this clip, like it, share it. You can also subscribe to the Builders Fan YouTube channel. There's a range of product reviews, DIYs, and how-tos just like this for you to be inspired, to get to builders, and get it done.